And now we bring you Killer Wives, Episode 7, Jezebel. These are the case facts behind Teresa Stone, who had her lover murder her own husband. Isn't trust a bitch?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
Independence, Missouri. Famous for the Oregon Trail, the childhood home of Harry S. Truman, and the murder of one Mr. Randy Stone.
But now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
What if your wife was having an affair with your closest friend behind your back? What if your wife became pregnant by that best friend and pretended it was your baby? What if that close friend of yours turned out to be the pastor of your local church you attended? What if that best friend, pastor of the local church, murdered you at the express urgings of your wife? Hello, this is Charles Rivers, and welcome to another version of Killer Wives. The scenario I just gave you was not a Hollywood script, but the sort of details surrounding the death of Randy Stone on the last day of March 2010. With spring's arrival still hanging in the air, Randy Stone was found dead in his insurance office with a bullet to the back of his head. The crime scene would cast many doubts of the murderer being a stranger, a robbery, or random killing. The first person to arrive on the scene after Randy's death was his wife, Teresa. Teresa Stone had conveniently allowed enough time to lapse after the shooting in which to reflect her innocence and support her alibis. Teresa pulled her car gingerly into a parking space late that afternoon beside her husband's blue Chevy Malibu. This car was the only other car in the lot, and she immediately noticed that someone had closed the insurance agency's blinds. Now, that's normal, she thought. Or did she say that's not normal? Now, she was late getting back to the office. She shared with her husband. Teresa had been shopping and running planned errands all afternoon. She remembered opening the blinds that morning, a couple of hours after arriving for work. As was Randy's habit, he never closed them before dark. Teresa keyed the lock, which turned easily, which meant that the harder to manage deadbolt had not been engaged as it normally was, which was also his policy. As she entered into the brightly lit yet silent offices, she yelled out, "Honey, where are you?" Teresa said. She looked in the storage room and saw the usual clutter, but not her husband. Teresa checked Randy's office and found nothing out of the ordinary. Randy had appeared to be missing or out running errands himself. But why would Randy leave the blinds closed, lights on, and the top bolt unlocked? Finally, after reaching the last office, which was her office down the hall, Teresa looked down to the floor, which is where she found her husband's body. Mr. Randy Stone, former insurance agent, father and husband, lay motionless on the carpeted floor next to his wife's desk, dead from a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Blood that had streamed from Randy's left ear had already begun to dry, and his head lay in moist puddle of bone fragments and brain matter. A space heater toppled due to his fall bore a crimson smear of blood. Blood splatter dotted furniture and walls in the direction the bullet exited his brain. and Randy's eyes had blackened, and his lips were blue. Now, answering the appearance of his eyeballs appearing black is in some cases normal after death. Normally, the eyes contain blood vessels. When one of those vessels pops for a living person, it will make your eyes appear red. But if this person happens to have recently deceased, it will make their eyes appear black, because the blood gets old and the blood turns black. If the blood in those tiny veins turns black and the tiny veins cover your eyes, it will of course make the eyes appear black. Returning to the scene of the murder. At this point, Teresa Stone says she yells out for Randy, "Wake up! Wake up, Randy!" Now, I don't know how anyone could expect a traumatically murdered human being to just wake up as if they were sleeping. She then says that she stepped over his body and reached for a wireless telephone headset. Instead of immediately calling 911, she says she called her parents, told them that Randy had been shot, and asked them to come down to the office. Notice, she just said Randy had been shot. This little nugget of information would come back to haunt her later on in the investigation. Now, personally, I believe that she engaged her parents first in order to establish a credible timeline and secure in their minds that she was not involved in his murder. Her parents then told her to hang up the phone immediately and call 911. The second call Teresa Stone would make that evening over her dead husband's body would be the 911 dispatcher. Her first response to that dispatcher would be, "Oh my God!" The 911 dispatcher would go on to ask her whether she needed fire or medical. Teresa would ultimately go on to frustrate that 911 dispatcher while pretending to be shocked. The dispatcher would ask her repeatedly what her address is and where was she located. After finally giving the address to the office, Teresa would concoct victimhood with the dispatcher. The dispatcher asked, "Now, what is wrong with your husband?" Teresa answered in a voice to throw her off that she was in distress. I don't know. There's blood everywhere. It's coming out of his ears. Now notice here that she paused and did not tell the 911 dispatcher that Randy had been shot as quickly as she told her parents a couple of minutes before. At this point, Teresa obeyed the 911 call taker's instructions. Teresa left the office and waited for patrol officers to arrive. The first officer on scene happened to be a member of her church. He darted inside, determined that Randy was dead, and went back out and told Teresa. "No!" she screamed out before collapsing in his arms. Obviously, a dramatic stage response to pretend that she cared more than she did, with the detectives now watching. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, her initial call to her parents had energized the New Hope Grapevine Church, which Randy and her both attended for years. Pastor Love heard word of it during a routine call at a South Kansas City hospital. Soon after, a church youth minister appeared outside the insurance office, and within minutes, Kim Love, the pastor's wife, pulled into the parking lot. After spotting Teresa Stone, Kim wrapped an arm around her and said, "I'm here for you. I'm praying for you. This is terrible." The pastor of Randy's church, Pastor Love, soon appeared about a half hour quicker than one would expect. He sized up the situation, left the comforting to others, and from the parking lot intently watched the detectives. As officers strung crime scene tape between utility poles to secure the front of the office, a half dozen detectives began investigating inside of the office. Someone asked Kim, the pastor's wife, to drive a shaky Teresa to a nearby restroom. Kim, the pastor's wife, submitted to duty, as she had throughout her entire marriage. But Kim also assessed her passenger coolly. To herself she thought, "Did you do this?" After that bathroom visit, Kim and Teresa returned to the parking lot where shocked friends, family, and church members grieved as investigators came and went from the insurance office. Tapped to lead the investigation, Detective Rose Warren waited outside while crime scene technicians and medical examiners worked. Already he'd learned that Randy, like him, was a veteran. Immensely proud of his military service, Rose Warren suspended his police ID on a Go Army lanyard. He had 20 years service in active duty Army, National Guard, and Reserve, and had served both in Iraq and Afghanistan investigating crimes. Detective Rosewarne felt an immediate kinship to Randy Stone. His life course is not much different than mine, he thought. The Stone's daughter, Miranda, arrived with her maternal grandparents, who had told her only that her father had been shot. Miranda would learn about his death in the parking lot and not from her mother, as she informed her parents on the phone. Teresa took a call from her son, Michael, at college in Florida. She only had time to tell him of his father's death before resuming a conversation with detectives. The now deceased Randy Stone and his wife Teresa had known each other since they were kids growing up in the northeast area of Kansas City, but didn't begin dating until he returned from Marine Corps duty in 1990. Randy, a tough guy with a soft side, wed Teresa, an attractive and flirtatious woman, later that same year. They soon began a family that would grow to four. A fitness fanatic, Randy thrived on competition, whether on the basketball court or in the office, where he built his farmers insurance agency as the most successful in the region. But he also wrote poetry for his wife, kept a journal, drove his church's Sunday school bus, and advised the congregation of financial issues. He was a man of the community. Now, Teresa Stone, his wife, worked in his Nolan Road office, first as a customer service representative, then as a licensed agent. She proved to be a steady business partner, opening the office every morning and allowing Randy to manage both the clients and the relationship with Farmers Insurance, whose products they sold. At the scene of the murder, investigators responded to the agency recovered a .40 caliber shell casing and a one-page handwritten letter in an adjoining wastepaper basket. That note read, "You are the center of my world," which her husband did not write. Teresa Stone denied knowledge of this letter to investigators. Within Randy's insurance building, officers found no evidence of a struggle, suggesting that Randy Stone knew who shot him. This was evident by a shot at close range and from behind, coupled with the fact that he had to let whoever it was into that insurance agency. Now, this would not have been easy, as Teresa noted that normally the bolt would be locked. Investigators also found $150 in cash on a desk in the office, meaningless in any other situation, but in this one indicating that Randy Stone was not killed in a robbery attempt. Later on in the investigation, police would successfully match the .40 caliber shell casing to others recovered on an eastern Jackson County farm where Stone liked to take target practice. This knowledge brought investigators to conclude that Randy had been killed with his own gun. The only problem with this scenario of Randy being shot with this particular weapon was that it was normally locked away in his combination gun safe on the other side of town. Teresa Stone, meanwhile, had proved very calm in demeanor, but much talkative and showing little emotion. Detective Rosewarne said there were no tears coming down her face. This is his true statement that day. She insisted to investigators that she was happily married and had no idea who had wanted to kill her husband. She neglected to tell investigators that she was in the middle of a 10-year adulterous affair with a man she had gotten pregnant by and miscarried a baby for. Teresa told them that she had spent March the 31st, she said, running errands, making a bank deposit, seeing a chiropractor, picking up her daughter at school at 3:15 p.m., and then going to a local Sonic restaurant. This pattern of behavior, although normal, as well as a telling situation where a killer or killers struggles to establish sound alibis. But her story checked out, as the times of her whereabouts were verified by receipts and video. Detective Rosewarne said, "It almost appears as if she went out of her way that day to document her life." Now, as for the torn letter in the wastepaper basket, Detective Rosewarne said that Teresa said it had been left on her car's windshield about a year earlier. Later on, she would change the time of the letter and the issuer several times. But while being left alone in an interrogation room at the Independence Police Department, Teresa Stone said aloud, I forgot about the letter. Because of this knowledge, a passionate hidden relationship surfaces outside of her marriage. Now, a typical homicide scene tells a story, and the one at Nolan Road Insurance Office told Detective Rose Warren Randy Stone likely knew and trusted his killer. Nowhere in any other offices could police detect signs of a struggle, not even a hint. Randy Stone appeared to have been ambushed, shot in the head while he had his back turned. The location of Randy's insurance office argued against the killing being opportunistic, random violence. It's highly unusual for someone to be gunned down during the day in a business on Nolan Road, one of Independence's busiest commercial streets. And forget robbery. Detectives found $151 in cash sitting on a desk. Plus, Randy's wallet remained in his back pocket, where it had always been, and untouched. But other questions emerged. Police hadn't found the murder weapon, but they had recovered a .40 caliber shell casing from the floor near Randy's feet. It didn't match the only firearm they found at the office, a .380 Ruger sitting in a drawer. And then there were the birthday note, ripped into 9 pieces and discarded in an office trash can. "Happy birthday, love," was the closing comments. But the letter read, "You are so very precious to my heart. I care for you more than anyone on earth. I'm not in control of things yet, but when we are fully together, your birthday will always be exciting, full of surprises, romantic, and all about loving you. You are the center of my world. I praise you. I adore you. I'm blessed by you. I need you. I love you." As police combed the office for more clues, Detectives Steve Smitty and Jerry Stewart conducted Teresa Stone's first interview at police headquarters. They learned the couple had been about to go through some financial strains because of business changes they had planned. But despite some recent stress, the marriage was said to have been strong. Teresa insisted this. "We were very much in love," she told them. The detectives asked her about a large handgun, a Glock, that one of Randy's police officer friends had seen him with. Teresa remembered only the little .380, guessing that Randy must have sold the bigger pistol about a year earlier. Now, I don't think he had that one anymore, because this little one is the only one I've seen for a very long time, she said. Detective Smithley brought up the birthday letter. "It was at the bottom of your trash can," he said. Teresa didn't recall it. Smithley and Stewart hustled out to see if crime scene techs had returned with a photo of that letter. I believe that Randy found this personal love letter from the pastor to his wife, tore it up, and placed it squarely at the bottom of her trash can for her to find. That's my personal belief. Now, neither his wife nor the pastor anticipated after his death that this would shine a light onto the adulterous relationship that they were having. At police headquarters alone in the interview room, but monitored by a hidden camera, Teresa agonized. "Oh, great," she whispered to herself. "I forgot about that." When the detectives returned, she conjured a story about an unknown secret admirer who left a note on her car years before. Though Teresa could appear casual and fun, she knew that keeping secrets was serious business, and the detective's question already had nicked a dark spot, one she steadfastly refused to reveal: a forbidden relationship with David Love, her pastor at New Hope Baptist Church. About a year after Pastor Love arrived to take over the church, he invited Teresa Stone into his private office. The birthday note that police found in the trash cheerfully recalled that moment. It reads, and I quote, "I remember 9 years ago telling you I had something for you in my office. It was me." The birthday note said, "I wanted to give you me. The kiss you took, and then you gave me one back. I felt like it was my birthday." End quote. The spontaneous and passionate affair began slowly, with weekly meetings wherever the opportunity presented itself. Sometimes when she knew her husband would be away from the insurance business for at least an hour, Teresa called Pastor Love. Their meetings increased to 3 times a week, and then to even 1 or 2 times a day. Teresa also had to fulfill her husband's need for affection simultaneously. "It wore me out," she recalled later on while being questioned. At Randy Stone's funeral, as detectives watched outside, his longtime pastor had given a moving eulogy for the 42-year-old Marine veteran, respected businessman, and church leader. Yes, that very same pastor that killed her husband was now eulogizing him at Teresa's insistence at his funeral. But almost immediately there were whispers and suspicions, rumors of illicit sex and betrayal, a torn-up love note discovered at the crime scene. Not enough, though, for police to make an arrest. On a stakeout in a car outside of the church, Detective Rose Warren hung up the phone as he saw the funeral letting out. He tucked a Miranda waiver from a folder under his arm and walked her to meet Teresa Stone. Now, he was hoping she would open up without a lawyer present. If she didn't like the questioning, she could always leave at any time. He said to himself, this is a one-shot deal. You gotta get her to talk. Now, in 2005, Teresa was a woman who was no stranger to keeping secrets. Teresa became pregnant with her pastor David's child, a condition she did not hide from Randy, who had undergone a vasectomy. The news shocked Randy, but to his knowledge, he had seen other couples conceive after vasectomies. So the idea of physiological malfunction wasn't completely alien to him. The issue faded after Teresa miscarried, though. In Teresa's mind, God spared her that day. Yet gossip occasionally spilled throughout the church. In 2008, Randy told a church staffer he soon would leave New Hope because he suspected his wife was having an affair with the pastor. Randy, that's ridiculous, said the staffer. You need to be careful of the accusations you make when it comes to those kinds of things, because that's a life-changing accusation for a pastor, she told him. Randy stuck with his wife and ministered, even submitting to a weekly counseling with Pastor David after his wife Teresa caught him watching pornography. But now, isn't it ironic that a wife would send her husband to counseling because she is shocked to the level of pornography that he is seeing at the level she is doing with another man? And worse is that that holy man is screwing his wife and sending her pornographic pictures of himself while counseling him not to do pornography and to wait until his wife is ready for sex before he approaches her. Now, it was said that porn troubled Teresa, and she responded by falling more deeply into her pastor's arms. And her pastor in turn responded in sometimes reckless ways. Pastor David posed in front of a digital camera for 30 profoundly intimate photographs, which he sent to Teresa and then deleted from his computer. In January of 2009, Pastor Love tapped out a series of passionate emails to Teresa, and I quote, I long for the touch of your hand as you walk by, and the twinkle in your pretty blue eyes as you smile at me. You are my doll. You are encouragement. Your encouragement is all that keeps me going. Thank you for being so wonderful, beautiful, sexy, and smart. I live to please you. I am so totally in love with you. The minister and his congregant wife imagined what it would be like to be married to one another. I cannot wait to watch you walk to me, knowing that we are officially about to be married. David wrote in January 2009, I love your ideas. I love your plans. I think you can collect wedding info and file it as if you are planning your daughter's wedding. Teresa responded to this that she would love an outdoor wedding. She says, maybe a rose garden or something like that. My dress, I'm not sure. When I find the perfect dress, you will be the first to see it. As they sought to understand their love, Pastor David Love reminded Teresa Stone of the biblical King David, Israel warrior king, who demonstrated that no man's depravity was beyond God's forgiveness. He was not even above murder, the pastor observed. King David, for example, orchestrated the death of Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, so he could take her as his wife. And the pastor said, and God still blessed him. David told Teresa at this time, Teresa pretended to dissuade her own David from extremes. She writes then, if God wants us to be together, God will make it happen, she said. But Pastor Love spoke as if he were an instrument of God's will. It's the warrior in me, he says, in April of that year. Teresa Stone told investigators that Pastor Love had written her the letter. She considered herself in love with him and added that she believed she had been pregnant but had miscarried. Her husband Randy, she said, had a vasectomy some time before. Also testifying was Robert Davis, a farmer's insurance district manager who went to the Stone home after Teresa Stone called and told him her husband was dead. At the house, Davis said he met a distraught Teresa Stone in front of her parents. She suggested that they go out on the porch and talk. Now, Davis says she immediately regained her composure and started asking about her husband's life insurance. When Davis examined 3 insurance policies that had been placed on a desk in a basement office at Teresa's behest, the policies suggested that Randy Stone had carried about $725,000 in life insurance benefits. But Davis later learned that the amount was closer to $575,000. He also learned that Randy Stone, in the year 2005, had made his children the beneficiaries of those policies instead of his wife. This was the same year that Teresa Stone got pregnant with the pastor's baby. When regional insurance agent Davis called Teresa Stone to tell her this, her reaction, he said, was of shock and disbelief. At police headquarters, Detective Keith Rosewarne got the call around 6 p.m., letting him know that the dead man's wife was waiting for him downstairs. He knew she might be his last chance. Inside Independence Police Department, where the buzz had been constant for 3 weeks, an interrogation room sat empty for the moment, soon to play the main stage in the city's most sensational homicide drama in years. Detective Rosewarne had been accustomed to interrogating detainees in Afghanistan. Now he will be questioning Teresa Stone, wife, mother of 2, obstinate witness, and unknown to her, a suspect in her husband's murder. Rumors had long swirled about an affair between David Love and Teresa Stone. Now police had to prove it. Detective Keith Rosewarne had scrambled successfully through the foothills of her interview with Teresa Stone. At 6:10 p.m., April 20th, 2010, she signed a Miranda waiver, agreeing to be interviewed without an attorney. Now Rosewarne had to climb the mountain, faced with 2 tidy alibis and rumors flying of a long-term affair. Rosewarne had plenty of reasons to suspect Teresa and Pastor David Love. Teresa had been an atypical homicide victim's wife. Most wives call detectives regularly, fishing for information and offering new leads. Teresa had been remarkably quiet in the past 20 days since her husband was murdered. Detectives believe that Teresa and David had engaged in a nearly 10-year affair, that Teresa had given David a .40 caliber Glock that belonged to her husband, and that they had communicated about the killing using disposable cell phones. But even with a solid theory and a nice pile of circumstantial evidence, Rosewarne believed that prosecutors never would file charges without significant admission from Teresa Stone or David Love. She was in the chair that Tuesday evening because detectives felt they had a better chance of breaking down her defenses. Now, Detective Rosewarne decided to start with that torn-up birthday note detectives found in Teresa's trash can the day of Randy's murder. So, previously, remember, she said she had no idea who had written the note and claimed it appeared on her windshield 3 years earlier. Now, this is different when she said 1 year earlier. So far, she claims she tore it up to keep it from her husband. We have to know, detectives said, who wrote that note and what's going on behind it. I think you understand if you have somebody who's infatuated with you, that's been pursuing you, we can't rule that person out as a suspect. Rosewarne pointed to the passages where the writer said, I praise you, I adore you, I'm blessed by you. There is verbiage that indicates that whoever wrote it is involved in Christianity or the church, he said. Was it David Love? That's what he asked her. Teresa Stone wilted for a minute and then said, yeah, he wrote it. But she wouldn't give up that easily. Is there any chance that David Love had anything to do with your husband's death? Detective Rosewarne asked her. Do you think he's capable of it? No, was her answer. Detective Rosewarne would have to be patient with Teresa. He had all night. But unknown to Teresa, a video feed in the interrogation room had drawn a crowd of a small conference room nearby. Detectives, prosecutors, and police commanders, all of whom had met daily to review and analyze evidence, settled in for a long night. Even some day shift employees hung around to watch. With each of Teresa's evasive tactics, knots of frustration tightened in the group, only to release when Rosewarne teased out a little bit more admission, such as Teresa's acknowledgement that she and David had communicated covertly with cell phones to hide a counseling relationship from David's wife. The detective's tone sharpened when Teresa denied a sexual relationship with Love. He says, "I've got 20 detectives out there that want to take this case to the grand jury tomorrow. They think we have enough evidence against you to have you charged, because they think you're involved in this. Not that you killed him, but that you have something to do with this." Now, Teresa's jaw dropped then, and she began sobbing. She goes on to say, "I've told you everything that happened on that day," she said. "I have receipts to show you the times and dates, and my daughter was with me. But aware of the birthday love note and secret cell phones, Rosewarne wasn't buying that her relationship with David Love was a chase one. No, sir, no. We're not going to wave red flags," he told her, "and tell the world, okay?" So he says he's not going to tell everybody. Don't worry about the community finding out. Rosewarne assured her, "Teresa, I already know what you're going to say, but I have to hear it from you." She paused and then she said, "Yes." Teresa sobbed. "We had sex." She soon acknowledged the 2005 miscarriage, switching course. So Detective Rosewarne picked at the odd discrepancy between the first two calls she made after finding Randy's body. She told her parents that Randy had been shot, remember, after discovering his body. She told the 911 dispatcher that Randy had blood coming from an ear, Rosewarne said, and then he stood, emphasizing that his patience was nearing exhaustion. "Who told you that he was shot?" Rosewarne said. He pressed her. "How do you know that he had been shot? And why didn't you tell us? You're not being truthful with me, are you, Teresa?" He said, "I don't know." And then she replied with a toss of her head. "You're not being truthful with me," he said. "I didn't," she said. Stopping to pause, he sent me a text and told me it was then that Miss Teresa Stone accidentally outed the pastor and stepped right into the biggest pile of shit in history. The opening grew wider in Teresa Stone's story. Who did? Say it. The detective insisted with an anguished whisper. Teresa took the case far beyond a theory of circumstantial evidence. She said, "Brother Love." That was her answer. The contents of the text had been ambiguous. That was sent to her, remember, on the phone? Seriously urgent, do not go back to the office. But Teresa's admission that David had sent her the message propelled the questioning along more than a dozen new and productive avenues. Investigators suspected from shell casings found at the insurance office that Randy had been killed with his own gun. But how did Brother Love get the gun? Teresa expressed complete bewilderment though she speculated that Love may have memorized a combination of Randy's gun safe when her husband was showing off his firearm collection. Now, the tempo of the interview increased. "This is tearing you up," Rosewarne said. "I'm trying to protect a godly man, supposed to be a godly man," Teresa said. "He told me in my room the next day." Teresa began sobbing, which quickly moved to hyperventilation. He told her, "Courage, Teresa, have courage." What did he say? He said, "You know, if I tell you that, I'm going to go to jail for murder," she said. However, Teresa remained adamant that she had no role in playing the killing. She seemed willing to acknowledge terrible behavior on her own part, but nothing that would expose her to criminal liability. Detective Rosewarne concluded she also wasn't afraid to lay crime at her lover's feet. Remember, a long 10-year relationship, but she just sold him out. Rosewarne's breakthroughs lightened the mood in the nearby conference room, where investigators began tossing around ideas for new questioning. When he finally stepped out, he collapsed in a chair outside the interview room during a break. Rosewarne fended off high fives from colleagues, telling him that they still had a long way to go. Now, Teresa Stone, he knew, did not give up the truth easily. One idea percolating through the room was to somehow put Teresa and David together to see if he would say something useful. More than 6 hours into the interview, a plan came together to have Teresa call him at home and press for a confession. Now, completely at the detective's mercy, she agreed. She put the call through at 12:43 a.m., April the 21st. Immediately, David appeared suspicious. You have to do something, Teresa said. I can't live like this anymore. This is just killing me. Okay, he responded. Who's there with you now? Are you at home? Quickly, it became clear that David's wife, Kim, stood nearby, inhibiting David's ability to speak frankly. But Teresa pushed ahead. I need to know why. I need to know why you killed my husband. I need to know, please. I can't live like this anymore. Before David could respond, though, Kim came on the line, demanding to know why Teresa was calling and asking what she thought her husband had done. Kim would not allow them to meet without her anymore. Trust you? Kim said. After all that you've done? After all that you've already done? She asked. Teresa, what do you want with David? What do you want with my husband? Just tell me what you want. Now, seeing that the call was going nowhere, Detective Rose Warren gestured to Teresa to disconnect it. At the Love home, Kim fired questions at her husband. Are you going to hurt me? And he says, honey, no, I would never do that. Did you have anything to do with this? She asked. No. Well, what is she doing? By then, David wasn't really paying attention to his wife. She's not going to pin this on me, he said. Both Loves headed for the garage. Kim stood at the door and looked at her son before she left. She asked her son Shelton, who was watching television, pray for me, Kim said. I don't know what's going on right now. David Love's home and church, New Hope Baptist, had been under surveillance for much of the evening. Just seconds after Teresa hung up her call, Detective Chris Summers detected activity at the house. And at 12:55 a.m., a gray Buick backed out of the driveway and headed towards US 24 and the Stones' home. David, the driver, glanced in the mirror and told his wife, there's a car following us. Kim again felt the cold grip of fear and uncertainty. She imagined Teresa pulling up and shooting her in the head. At that moment, she did not know that Teresa was calling them from the police station. Honey, is something about to happen to me? Kim asked. No, honey, replied David, unruffled. In less than a minute, an Independence Patrol officer pulled over the car, and police handcuffed and arrested Pastor Love. Kim agreed to go along to the headquarters for an interview, even though officers assured her that she was not a suspect. Back at headquarters, another plan materialized. Rose Warren quizzed Teresa about her willingness to meet with Love to see if she could encourage him to say anything. She was willing to try. I would hope he would cooperate with you guys, being that he is in the state that he is in, she said. I mean, as a man of God, he is held liable to the Most High God that we have, and I know I am too. Now, I would think he would be honest, she said. All this coming from a woman who got a pastor to break all 10 commandments, which resulted in the death of her husband, and now she is getting religion. Now, indeed, she was a quintessential Jezebel. Minutes later, David Love stopped and stepped off an elevator at the station. Flanked by 2 detectives, Teresa Stone with her own detective escort now emerged from a hallway, looking as if she had stumbled into a chance meeting. The 2 stopped, looked at each other. In their final encounter, neither spoke the truth. I told them everything, a distraught Teresa said. David appeared to be stoic and did not speak for 20 seconds. But he said, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Independence police searched Reverend David Love and plopped him in a bare interview room not far away. Teresa Stone had spent the previous 8 hours gradually implicating him, step by reluctant step, in the murder of her husband, Randy Stone, 3 weeks just earlier. Along with these thoughts, David put his shoes back on and laced them meticulously. He adjusted his socks and pant leg carefully, smoothed out his shirt tail, and fluffed his hair. And then, clasping his hands in his lap, he settled in, stared straight ahead, and scarcely moved for the next 9 minutes. Detective Keith Rose Warren, by then mentally exhausted from his interview with Teresa, finally entered and told David that he had learned quite a bit in the past few hours. Rose Warren knew from his time with Teresa that coaching questions in a church-friendly manner could be effective with these suspects. He'd try again, even though Rose Warren was not a particularly religious man. I'm going to tell you right now that this is not easy because I know that you have spent your life working for the Lord, Rose Warren said to the priest. You are the leader of a church, and from what I know, this is hard. It's not easy to just go on this way. He says, "You just need to find it in your heart to have the courage to be truthful with me and to put it in the Lord's hands." Now, before asking questions, Rose Warren's needed Pastor David to agree to be interviewed without an attorney, just as he did Teresa. But Love declined, telling Detective Rose Warren softly that he'd rather have a lawyer present. He says, "I definitely need some kind of representation because I'm a preacher," Love said. "I don't know the law." But before leaving to arrange a jail cell, Detective Rose Warren told Love to expect charges soon. "We're going to take this case file to the courthouse tomorrow and ask for an arrest warrant for murder," he told him. Love again clasped his hands impassively, sat stone still, and waited for the detectives to return with the handcuffs. Just down the hall, Detectives Lawrence Freeman and Aaron Geitzen had found a cooperative witness in Kim Love, Pastor David's wife. Now, profoundly suspicious of her husband, Kim agreed to speak with investigators, probe what they knew, and share the details of her own systematic investigation of David's odd relationship with Teresa. Kim revealed that almost 28 years of marriage, she had become acutely aware of the perils of being married to a charismatic spiritual leader. A handsome pastor and all that stuff, she said. Sometimes you kind of fear women. She confirmed something that had only been on a promising theory 24 hours earlier. Yes, her husband and Teresa Stone had been communicating with disposable cell phones. In March 2009, she said she caught him late at night in the family's kitchen sending the text, "I love you and miss you," to a number she didn't recognize. He explained it was a way as a text to someone he didn't know, a nobody really, and immediately took texting off his cell plan. "I'll prove to you that I love you," he told her. A year later, on March 16, 2010, she again suspected that he was sending text messages, this time after disappearing into a garage during a televised University of North Carolina basketball game. After he returned to the game, she charged out to look for a phone, but found nothing. She returned to the couch and prayed. "I said, Lord, if there's something out there, you help me find it," she told Freeman and Geitzen, "and I went back out and put my hands right on that phone." Her husband immediately acknowledged that he had been texting Teresa, but insisted that it was just a talking relationship and that he was counseling her on her marriage. But his wife said, "I'm so dumb to believe all this," Kim told the detectives. "It's like the movies that you watch." Teresa long had been in Kim's sights. Not long after Kim and her husband arrived at the church 11 years ago, Kim had become suspicious of Teresa when she would put her head on David's shoulders while speaking with him. She knew right away this was wrong, especially in that type of relationship, both of them being married. So, Kim had broken that up quickly, telling her husband that it doesn't look very good. "Sometimes you just have a feeling about certain women that kind of have a thing for your husband," she told detectives. "I just always kind of felt she did, but I could never put my finger on anything he did wrong." In the ensuing years, her suspicions grew early in 2010. David had given Kim a silver ring purchased from an independent center jewelry store. Kim took it back to find something more to her liking. A retail clerk printed up a copy of the receipt, which included a $299 silver ring set with several small diamonds. Her husband had paid only a sixth as much, $49.99, for Kim's ring. Willing to believe that David might have been saving the second ring for her upcoming birthday, Kim remained curious and checked the jewelry store website to see what it looked like. Instantly, she recognized it as one of Teresa's had been wearing recently with her wedding ring. So when she seen her at one night at church on Wednesday, Kim decided to probe. She looked at the ring and told her, "Oh, that's a pretty ring." She cooed to Teresa, and Teresa snapped back. "That's a $9.99 ring from JCPenney," Teresa retorted. After Kim confronted her husband about it, David recovered the ring from Teresa and gave it to his wife, but still insisted that the relationship was not physical. "I really believed him," Kim told the detectives. "The stupidest thing I've ever done was buy her that ring." Her own credulity aside, Kim expressed pride in her sleuthing. "Honest to goodness, I think I should have been a detective because I had the best intuition in the world," she said, before offering detectives a small parting gift. Digging into a large purse for her billfold, she withdrew a slip of paper containing phone numbers that she methodically copied from an electronic memory of that disposable cell phone she'd found in the garage, March 16th. She'd thrown the telephone in an Independence Center trash can after returning both rings to the jewelry store and picking out a gold one that she enjoyed better. And she took the news that investigators believe her husband was directly involved in Randy Stone's death and had made plans to kill her too, remarkably well. Imagine that. A minister's going to kill a parishioner and his own wife. Now, how is it that you are holding it together right now? The detective asked her. She says, "It's God," Kim said. "I'm surprised, but I have my questions." Twice during his 24-hour stay in the Independence jail, Pastor David Love called family members asking that they bring him a Bible and then a hairbrush. And each time Kim pressed him on whether the investigators' accusations were true. "Did Teresa set you up? Or what's going on?" Kim asked during the first call. "Well, this is all being recorded," David replied, before trying to change the topic. "So I think I'm going to appear to be arraigned in the morning. I need an attorney. They tell me I'm going to be arraigned." This is what the pastor said. Again, she said, "Did you do it?" She followed up, "Honey, I wish I could be there with you in the morning," he said. "Did you do it?" He said, "Sweetheart, it's not wise for me to say anything over the phone because it's being recorded." "Okay," he said. Finally, the murder charge that Detective Rose Warren promised the next day did not materialize. Jackson County prosecutors wanted the investigation clinched down and complete before they filed charges. They wanted it locked solid, and the analysis of cell phone records and computers still was underway. Those results could take months. So after an overnight stay, David walked out free, right from jail, to a hail of questions from members of the church and the media. He called a meeting at his home Friday, April the 23rd, and announced to 7 church members his resignation as a pastor. He'd written a statement. "It is with remorse and repentance that I resign," it read. "I have sinned against my Lord, my family, and against the Lord's church. I am resigning because of my sin of immorality." Now notice he didn't say the sin that he just killed a guy. "I have asked God to forgive me for sinning and deceiving my family and each of you. I ask the staff, deacons, officers, and members to receive my resignation and to forgive me of my sins." A church deacon later reported that David admitted the affair but denied any role in Randy's murder. On the following Sunday, Rose Warren and a squad of detectives and officers appeared at David Love's house to serve a search warrant. Detective David Love said, greeting Warren at the door, "Hello." Rose Warren replied, "Police herded the family together to get them out of the way while officers took photos and gathered evidence about the house. Pastor David Love in turn gathered the family around a piano and treated police to a family gospel sing-along." But the media and police attention weighed on the preacher. After the detectives left, David Love slipped out of town with his brother. David would not tell Kim where he was headed, but said to contact his brother if she needed to reach him. He took his birth certificate and passport with him as well. Now, a more clear picture of motive to kill Randy emerges. Randy Stone had decided to leave New Hope Baptist Church, taking Teresa farther away from Pastor David Love. Later, a sting was set up to entrap Teresa Stone over a lunch date that she was having with her mother-in-law. When Teresa Stone met Clara Kohler, Randy's mom, her police wire passed what you call the hug test, so when she hugged her. As Teresa Stone greeted her mother-in-law at the Smokehouse Barbecue in June 2010, she didn't notice the transmitter that independent police had wrapped around Kohler's waist, or the microphone that was hidden right beneath her shoulder. Now, the tension in Kohler's gut eased, and the pair settled down to lunch and a chat about the police investigation into the murder of Randy Stone, Teresa's husband, and Kohler's son. At this Nolan Road insurance agency, 3 months earlier, she told Rose Warren that Reverend David Love, her secret lover for 10 years, had confessed the murder to her. But how did the pastor get Randy's gun? And what role did Teresa really play in the homicide? Teresa theorized over lunch that perhaps the pastor hadn't acted alone. Maybe she speculated Love had someone else shoot Randy, and the preacher just came to check that Randy was dead and closed the office blinds while he was there. But overall, Independence Police didn't seem to have much. Teresa concluded in her chat with Kohler, "They just fishing," she said. Rose Warren knew that wasn't true. Still, he wanted more. You know, each time we bring you one of these cases, I notice a classic wife-to-husband murder pattern. Usually, if the wife does not kill her own husband, she elicits another man to do so. If not, she does it for insurance money. This solicitation may be by romance, a few times by actual money. But one thing rings true in each of these cases, and that is the woman gives over the men easily to the police as they did their husbands to the killer. In essence, these women see men's lives as highly disposable for their amusement. Now, back to the case. By summer of 2010, Independence police had stitched together a convincing circumstantial case against the lovers, even without the damning admission Teresa had made during her long April interview with Rose Warren. As word spread of progress in the investigation, old witnesses came forward with fresh recollections, and new witnesses appeared with insights into how the couple had behaved immediately after Randy's death. Mr. David Trump, a Baptist pastor in West Virginia, contacted detectives and reported that he'd spoken with David Love and Teresa Stone the day after the murder and was struck with how both immediately shared their alibis for that afternoon. He offered detectives detailed notes of those telephone calls and even agreed to record any future conversations with the two. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when the crime lab established conclusively that Randy had been killed with his own .40 caliber Glock, cementing the theory that he had been shot by someone he knew. In her April interview with detectives, Teresa revealed that David Love had told her he had dumped the weapon 20 miles from the murder scene, but police had not found it. However, police did recover 5 old shells, casings fired from Randy's gun at a target range on Teresa's parents' rural property. So, weeks later, experts matched firing pin strike marks on those casings with the ones of the casings found on Randy's person at the edge of his feet. So, Randy's insurance benefits also became clear, and the news shocked Teresa. After thorough analysis, experts concluded that she was not entitled to up to $800,000 on her husband's death, as she first thought she would be, as she first told her friends. Randy had taken Teresa off his policy in 2005, the year she miscarried David Love's child. Randy had directed that the money, which actually totaled $625,000, go to their 2 children, who were minors at the time. Computer forensics that bore fruit in the summer of 2010 gave Rose Warren other insights into the motive, which were things like recovered emails, showing that 2 weeks before the murder, Randy had made a firm decision to leave New Hope Baptist Church, informing the pastor that he wasn't pleased with the church's finances. He said, "I'm resigning as a finance minister and as a Sunday school teacher effective immediately." He wrote an email. Randy had noticed previously that over $30,000 was missing from the church's funding without a paper trail. In Randy's email, he wrote, "I do not want to talk about it. I do not want any emails. I do not want any visits." Randy also had been upset that church leaders had not informed that Pastor Love's son, who worked as a New Hope minister director, had been charged with driving while intoxicated. That point was particularly sensitive, Love knew, because in a conservative congregation, even the son's legal problems could lead to the pastor's dismissal. Randy's announcement prompted an ugly showdown at the insurance office. Love accused his congregant of being too prideful and tried to drive a wedge between the Stones by accusing Teresa of sexual indiscretions with 2 other men. And Kim Love, the pastor's wife, had confronted Teresa about a ring David had given her and about disposable cell phones Teresa used to communicate with the pastor. So always in these cases, the plot thickens. The showdown did not shake Randy's determination to leave New Hope, but he was gracious in a follow-up email to David Love. He says, and I quote, "I love you, Pastor, and I really wish things would be different, but too much has been said and done to come back." As detectives examined the new information, the primary motive for the homicide became clear. The insurance money was a factor for Teresa, but by walking away from the church, Randy was taking her farther and farther away from David. She no longer would work in the church kitchen, attend church rehearsal choirs, David's sermons stirred the congregation on Sunday mornings, and she would miss that. Randy also knew or suspected enough to possibly crash David Love's future. His financial questions could get David fired from New Hope. And if he acted on suspicion of his wife's affair, Randy could wreck any hope that David Love ever worked again. Whether or not he realized it, Randy Stone had become the greatest threat to David Love's happiness and livelihood. Soon after the killing, prosecutors and investigators had agreed that the case would only be charged when the investigators had a complete and locked up case. They reached their comfort level in November of 2010 when prosecutors presented their evidence to a grand jury. Pastor Love's secrets were finally revealed prior to the trial. Even after the pastor moved on from preaching to driving over-the-road trucks, Independence police detectives Keith Rose Warren and Christina Nunez hovered over a speakerphone at the South Carolina truck terminal where he worked and heard rising suspicions creeping to David Love's voice at the call on the other end. Love's supervisor had called him to come into the office to sign paperwork. A ruse, actually, so the Missouri detectives could arrest him. 7 months after Pastor Love shot congregant Randy Stone to death in Stone's Dolan Road office agency, a Jackson County grand jury had indicted Love on a charge of first-degree murder. "What do you have for me to sign?" Love asked his boss that day over the phone in November of 2010. "Is everything okay?" Love had slipped out of the Independence after resigning as pastor of the New Hope Baptist Church in late April. Now, nearly a month after killing, by then, Teresa Stone, Randy Stone's widow, had told police that she and Love had been lovers for 10 years, eventually meeting almost daily for sex. The financial hit to the Love family had been substantial. Kim, still devoted to her family, had joined her husband in South Carolina, where he found work as a long-haul trucker. Now, everybody in Tidewater Trucking office got antsy after 10 minutes of waiting. Finally, a worker stepped in to say Love had parked his 18-wheeler outside the gate and gotten in his car and taken off. Now, leaving the deputy behind at the terminal, Rose Warren and Nunez hopped into a Spartanburg County patrol cars and raced to Love's home about 20 minutes away from that truck site. Just as they arrived at his home 20 minutes away, Rose Warren's cruiser lit up. "Hey," the deputy called, "the guy's back." Love hadn't tried to flee. Suspecting he was going to be arrested, he'd gone to get his wife so she could be there to take the car and hopefully keep it from ending up in a police impound lot, as it had happened to their cars back in Independence. As Rose Warren returned to the truck terminal, Kim recognized him as one of the detectives who had searched for her Independence home that spring. "Do you believe he did this?" a distraught Kim asked him. "Do you believe he did this?" The Spartanburg County deputy already had handcuffed David Love's wrists. Later at the county jail, Detective Rose Warren showed Love the arrest warrant. "Here are first-degree murder charges," Rose Warren said. "You've lost your job. You've moved out here. You're not talking to us. Is this working for you?" Now, Pastor Love fell back on a familiar line. "I just feel I need an attorney," he said. "I don't trust you guys." Continued to press Rose Warren, told him that people hurting back in Independence needed closure. That brought tears to David Love's eyes. "Look," Love said, "Randy was my friend too. How could you be his friend if you kill him?" Now, 8 months after her husband's murder, Teresa Stone entered a small first-floor office at the Jackson County Courthouse Annex in Independence, finally ready to reveal her final secrets. She had yet to detail just how her former lover obtained her husband's .40 caliber Glock, which fired the fatal shot. And she still hadn't been honest about whether she encouraged Love to commit the murder or helped him plan it. But hoping desperately to avoid a long prison sentence and save herself, and thinking that cooperation would help, she sat down with the prosecutors. Accompanied by a veteran defense lawyer, John P. O'Connor, Teresa announced that she was prepared without condition or promises to answer questions under oath. Now, Assistant Jackson County Prosecutor Patrick Edwards remained queasy about using her as witness against Pastor Love because she'd be too easy to discredit. Why should prosecutors own those problems? Edwards asked himself. Now, for anything to work, Teresa would have to show that she could make a crisp and truthful admissions without the histrionics she'd employed to frustrate detectives earlier. Now, In short, that meant exaggerated dramatic behavior designed to attract attention. Or more simply, acting. They didn't want an actress. As a court reporter recorded the discussion, Assistant Prosecutor Tammy Dixon got right up into the questions. And she asked her, "How was he going to get access to Randy's guns?" she asked. She responded, "I gave him the code to the gun safe, and the code to our garage door, and to our alarm code," Teresa replied. "So he had access to the house to get in." "Yes, ma'am." She said Teresa also admitted that she helped turn Love into a killer. "I sent him a text that said, 'I want him dead.' I told him that I just wanted him out of my life. And with that, her last secrets were out." In her job as an assistant public defender, Molly Hastings usually represented violent street criminals, not educated, articulate, and once respected men of God like David Love. Prosecutors had charged Love with first-degree murder, which carried a mandatory life sentence. So he had every incentive to seek acquittal at trial. Love proved a low-maintenance defendant, seldom calling Hastings, but always grateful and concerned about her well-being when he did. He became an immediate hit among her other clients housed at the Jackson County Jail. They appreciated his acute listening skills and liked having their own pastor among them. "He's really blossoming there," she mused in her Kansas City office after getting the case in December 2010. Things started to get just a little bit more interesting, people. Now, the state's case against Love always and also was blossoming. As crime and computer labs finished, their studies Hastings' office slowly filled with interviews and forensic reports, computer hard drive analysis, and cell phone records that had been matched with data showing where each phone had pinged a cell tower on the day Randy Stone died. And that's where things revealed. A lot of it looked very bad for David Love. One cell phone tower analysis had his phone within at least striking distance of Randy Stone's insurance office in the rough time period in which the investigation believed Randy died. Now, as she plowed through evidence over several months, Hastings' strategy began to take shape. Apologize to jurors for David Love's despicable conduct with Teresa. Okay, so we're going to try to put it on her to form a case. She wanted to encourage jurors to at least consider that Teresa could have pulled the trigger, and then tear into Teresa's credibility on cross-examination, exposing the lies she had told during her various police statements. Prosecutors indicted Teresa Stone on May 27, 2011, for allegedly conspiring with David Love in the murder. Now, but even without that weighing against her, Teresa's testimony still could damage David critically. Jurors had to see Teresa as the party who drove the adulterous relationship and who was in twisted and unrelenting competition with David's wife, Kim. Now, Hastings honed a line that she could use to drive home that point to jurors in closing arguments. "Some women love a man in uniform," Hastings said. "Teresa has a thing for the clergy. She is the one who thinks she could be a good pastor's wife." With trial scheduled to open December 5, 2011, Hastings and prosecutors began deposing witnesses during a grueling 3-week stretch in the fall of 2011. With almost 24 depositions completed, the last one loomed particularly large. Teresa Stone on Tuesday, November the 8th. For Hastings, the deposition represented a full contact practice round with Teresa before she had to repeat it in front of jurors. Working late that evening of Thursday, November 3rd, Hastings noticed a fresh email from prosecutors pop into her inbox. It was new analysis of text messages between David and Teresa, showing contact between the two later than the client previously had acknowledged. Hastings exhaled in frustration. It's one more thing, she thought. Exasperated, she called Dixon about 7:30 p.m. "Would you give me murder 2 on this?" So she wanted murder 2. Hastings asked, pleading for a deal that could take mandatory life without possibility of parole off the table. Dixon agreed, but with conditions. David would have to accept life with the possibility of parole. But he had to take the deal by Monday so the prosecutors could spare Randy's son and Teresa from deposition. Hastings was not optimistic that Love would accept, and she felt fine with that. She looked forward to trial and remained convinced that Teresa had a lot more to do with her husband's murder than she had admitted. In a jail visiting room the next day, she laid out the plea agreement for Love in the starkest possible terms. Here's the benefit to you. You get out of prison before you die. Love, who was 51, could be out of prison on parole by about age 70, his lawyers estimated. No way, he said. Absolutely not. Okay, she replied, and left to call Kim Love. Hastings waited to call Dixon. The deadline wasn't until Monday over the weekend. Kim Love called Hastings. Pastor wants to speak with you now, she said. Over a small metal table in the jail's visiting room, David Love could see his lawyer's anger. A few minutes earlier, he'd asked Hastings to shoo away her investigators and co-counsel, both of whom had invested the same long hours as Hastings in this defense. I really need to talk to you by yourself, Love said. You have 5 minutes, Hastings replied. Love's tone softened. Put your hands on the table, he said. The request angered the lawyer even more, but she did as he asked. Love covered her hands with his. What's going on? What is this? She asked. I'll take it, he cried. I'll take it. Hastings' eyes widened. What do you mean you'll take it? He says, I am not an innocent man, and then began to sob fully. Acknowledging his fall from grace for the first time, Love's posture in the chair seemed to ease, as if a vast weight had slipped off his shoulders. They talked more. After a few minutes, Hastings took a break and called Dixon, pulling her out of a meeting 2 blocks away. Cancel all depositions, Hastings said. We have a deal. Dixon asked if Hastings was joking. No, but 100 million things can go wrong with this. Returning to an interview room, Hastings found her client more composed. His eyes seemed brighter, and he appeared more relaxed, hopeful and confident. You're a special person, he said. I'm taking a deal. I'm taking responsibility for this. Still, Hastings worried about the court hearing Love now faced. A court packed with family members, friends, and media could cause the plea deal to crumble, and prosecutors worried that a sudden influx of national media could force a change of venue for Teresa Stone's trial to Springfield or even further afield. All the lawyers felt a quiet plea was the way to go, so they wanted to keep it a secret. And prosecutors had a plan to keep some of Stone's more distant relatives from tipping off the press. They warned that if the word plea leaked out ahead of time, prosecutors would consider a less serious prison term for David Love. Reporters and the general public learned nothing about the hearing, which began at 8 a.m. November 9, 2011, in an Independence courtroom. Wearing a suit instead of jail attire, Love took the stand while Hastings positioned herself between the Stone family and the gallery and her client's line of sight. The previous day, she had rehearsed a legal litany that she and Love would have to recite to have the guilty pleas accepted by the court. She had pared it down to the bare minimum. On March 31st, 2010, in Jackson County, did you knowingly cause the death of Randy Stone by shooting him? She asked. Yes, Love responded. Did you use a firearm and commit the crime of armed criminal action? She followed up. Yes. The judge sentenced Love to life in prison. The hearing took only about 30 minutes. Heading out the door to prison, Love told prosecutors in passing that he had thrown Randy's Glock into a fast food restaurant trash bin shortly after the killing. Prosecutors remained skeptical, however, since he'd never made an admission under oath. By 8:40 a.m., Hastings pulled away from the courthouse and noticed a TV news van screech to a curb. Hastings left with mixed feelings. By pleading guilty, Love had accepted responsibility and spared both the Stone and Love families the misery of a trial. But it would have been the trial of my career, she thought. The court set Teresa Stone's judgment day for June 15th, 2012, 1 year later, a Friday. She pleaded guilty 6 weeks before never having received a deal from prosecutors. With a pile of her own incriminating admissions stacked against her record, a trial seemed pointless. A media horde packed the hallway outside the Division 16 courtroom in Independence. Inside, spectators filled the courtroom. Pew-like benches. Michael and Miranda Stone sat in the first row. Not far away, their mother, Teresa Stone, wearing a black jacket over a white top. She sat at a table facing Jackson County Circuit Court Judge Marco Roldan. Randy Stone's mother, Clara Collar, sat beside Teresa. In the first rows of the pews, across the aisle from Michael and Miranda, her grandchildren. Prosecutors had given the defense lawyer O'Connor copies of photographs of Randy Stone's body lying on the floor. They planned to project them in the courtroom wall and wanted these children who hadn't seen them to be prepared. Dixon, the lead prosecutor, rose to begin. And this is what he said. Her lover was her hitman. The image of Randy's body didn't linger as Dixon swiftly described other evidence, such as torn up love note and emails between Teresa and Pastor Love documenting dialogue the two had shared regarding their wedding plans. She wanted a perfect life, no matter what the cost, Dixon said. But Dixon added, today is not about what Teresa Stone wants. It's about what she deserves. Dixon detailed the murder scheme, and Teresa mistakenly believed that she would receive as much as $800,000 in life insurance payouts. The prosecutor summoned Rose Warren, who described Teresa's detailed alibi at the time of the killing. Randy's farmer's insurance supervisor, Robert Davis, described Teresa's distraught demeanor when he visited the Stone home that day after the murder, and how that didn't last long. She suggested that we go out front on the porch, Davis testified. Remember we going back to this? When he talked to her and she went out the porch, she changed, right? She immediately regained her composure and started asking about life insurance. Randy had switched the beneficiaries on the policies from Teresa to Michael and Miranda in 2005, Davis said. Randy Stone didn't trust her. And do you blame him? Dixon said. The man was onto something. Miranda and Michael pleaded with Roden to show their mother mercy. Then Randy's niece, Shelley Bell, testified that the previous day would have been her uncle's 45th birthday. She asked Roden to impose the maximum sentence available to reflect the cold-hearted decision made by this woman.